Welcome to episode 5 of Unhinged. I'm drewbreez, and I'm here with Koku, friend, journalist, entertainer, host, all-around entertainer, and KD Stan.
Yes. Hey, KD.
I love doing this pod, and I'm just glad that we actually have the opportunity to do it. I'm like varsity underachiever, like magna cum laude summer school. So like that's me, but like I feel like you kind of put me on another level, which is fortunate.
Yeah, no, I agree. Guys, my name is Koku, otherwise known as Koku Puff as well. And what I love doing about this pod is that we've just been bouncing off so many creative ideas off of each other, and it's just given me something like some sort of renewed purpose and something that I don't have to be doing, but I actually really like doing. And that's what it's not a chore. It's not a chore.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a media vet. Like that's one thing I'll say. Like that's like code for like I've been fired from media jobs, but all jobs that I had some success with, which was fun and cool. But I think doing something creatively that you want to do and that kind of like gives you a sense of delight and humor and like just levity about the world is far better. Like, I mean, I've done so many formats with different companies, like that have been on your TV screen too, and it's just like they can just suck the life out of something. And this feels like the opposite. This feels like it's giving, as the kids say. It's giving. So I'm very I'm ready to get sassy right now. Like it's sassy Santana. But thank you for joining. I want to talk a little bit about the providence of good religious leaders and the shadiness of poor ones, because I saw this news headline that started to circulate about a bishop from Brooklyn, from Canarsie area. Shout out to Canarsie. I grew up over there. His name is Bishop Lamor Whitehead, and he was robbed of, at first the report was $800,000 worth of jewelry. Then he was robbed of $1 million worth of jewelry.
No, I think the first one was 400,000.
Oh, it was 400 bands was the first one.
Then it started going up.
Then he called the reporter and was like, I'd like to issue a correction. I would never be caught in anything less than $1 million.
Right.
What happened there? Because like you saw this before I did, and I was just I can't get over the fact that there's a man of the cloth walking around with $1 million worth of jewelry on him.
Oh, but it's not surprising. It's what's done. These charlatans, and first of all, I don't have anything for this man. Okay, like for real. Like what I think it's ridiculous, and I just think, and a lot of times too, I'm really big on the right message also has to come from the right person. So if all of that, if the energy from that person is evil and wicked, I don't care what they're talking about. I don't want to hear it. I say the same thing about Kanye's gospel music. Those people are phenomenal singers, but I don't want nothing that comes out of the Kanye channel or pipeline that's talking about Jesus and God and spirituality, because that's a sickness. That ain't got nothing to do with anything I'm doing over here. That said, I believe it was an inside job. You can look at the reactions of people in the audience. It's kind of like, first of all, somebody's getting robbed and you are at Sunday service. Yeah, there's a video. Yeah, you could see that it was streamed. Yeah, it was live streamed. Wow. If somebody was getting robbed at Sunday service, I'm talking about like, grandmas would fall out. It would be like the craziest thing ever. Like, this will go into something else that we're going to talk about probably a little bit later, but it's like we've all seen things. We've been in environments where like really, really like wild things have happened in front of us, whether that's violence or just like really bad things. And I just don't see it that everybody, that the reactions would be so even in a situation like that, particularly given the environment.
So they
if I saw somebody get robbed at church, I'd be like,
that's not the church you want to be at.
And it's interesting because Brooklyn is a very, very small world. I know several people that know this man, and it's very interesting because a lot of people are defending him. And I'm like, just because you know a person doesn't mean that person is doing any good.
Has the flock been corrupted as well? Like,
listen, Recently, even to add to this, Creflo Dollar has denounced now the sort of the tithing
Right.
insistence in that kind of community, in that world. This is a man that was raising money for the church to get him a private jet at some point because he believed he deserved it, with this mega pastor. And it was just always so ridiculous to me. Like, what do you guys believe? You see people tithing, right? Like, people that can barely make it. And a lot of times, like, poor people are always, they're kind of like motivated to give because they feel that the giving nature is going to bring you many more resources. It's going to come right. And and for me, I feel like, and I can agree with that. I understand the mindset, but for me, it is particularly disturbing when I see that people prey upon those types of individuals who feel this way.
That's the grift. That's the grift. Exactly.
Yeah, the grift, charlatans, all these people. Like I told you, anybody that decides to stand in front of you and tell you that they are the man of the cloth, man of God, a spiritual healer, politician, president of the United States, any of those people, you need to be very, very careful about who you believe that person is, who they say that they are, and what you believe that they intend to do. Because in many of these cases, it is very rare to find someone that is very loud in a charitable sense, or even in an idea sense, that really is coming from a genuinely good place. Those people exist, they're there, but they're far more, there's far greater of a population of people that are just doing it for, the bag, so to speak.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I mean, as I peruse this news story, I saw that Bishop Whitehead was also like friends with Eric Adams, Mayor Eric Adams. And I was like, this looks like the opening scene of a Batman movie, like the creature getting robbed by Bane, and then like that sets off a chain of events where Batman has to root out the corruption in Gotham. And I'm like, I think you're spot on, because I'm like, Jesus would have been wearing black Air Forces. You know what I mean? Like if Jesus was around right now, he would not be on the I'm wearing like $100,000 worth of the earrings. It wouldn't be any of that.
With taped up soles, with construction silver tape. That's the type of person that is really trying to come with a message, and a very, very come as you are. Yeah. If you look at Lamor's, if you look at his Instagram, because he ain't no bishop to me. I'm sorry. This is just, I'm not doing that.
Just personally basis.
That's crazy. Unless, if your mama called you bishop, because that's what she decided. Some people are named master, bishop,
Right.
All right, cool. But not like this. This man, if you look at his Instagram, it's like he's out here like in luxury whips, showing you his freaking walk-in closet with all these like hundreds of thousands of dollars, like showing you God has blessed me with Louis Vuitton, God done blessed me with Balenciaga. That's craziness to me, and you are preaching to people that are looking for healing, they're looking for understanding, and they're looking for benevolence, or just a good word, or just something to look forward to. And I think that's just really, really nasty and disgusting when those kinds of people find the grift, and because religion is one of those places where there's a fine line. It's kind of one of those things where it's like, nah, they can't really be doing this. They can't be really evil like that, are they? But then you had Jim Jones had people drinking the Kool-Aid. Yeah.
I mean, one thing I realize about this particular Christian grift, because it's Christian. Like, I'm not going to say that like it's outside of other religions, but like Christianity has like a monopoly on like the mega churches and like the huge conglomerate type companies and
pastors in Yeezys.
Yeah, exactly, right. Yeah. Like the Yeezy gospel. And what's crazy about that is like, it literally says in the Bible that it's easier to get a camel through the eye of a needle than it is to get a rich man into heaven. So it's like there are biblical verses, like entire Bible books based on why you shouldn't be like usurping and like, trading and kind of obsessed with money and greed. Greed is one of the 7 deadly sins. Like there are so many like biblical roots in, don't chase the bag, like that you can't take it with you. Like all of that is so like ancient in wisdom. And yet these folks, like the grifters that we talk about, they're like really proudly kind of preaching this new gospel of like, God wants you to have it. Like it's more like God wants me to have it, and he wants me to get what you have. But like even that premise is like, even a cursory read, because I'm no Bible thumper, you know what I mean? But even like a cursory reading of the Bible shows you that that's not really what that whole
yeah,
thing
that's not
about.
how it works.
Yeah,
No.
it's
And also
crazy.
with respect to Lamar, this is a man, listen, I know that crimes are committed every day, B, right? Like there's a lot of people do a lot of different crimes, but the type of crimes that certain people do absolutely informs how I look at the person and what I think that they're capable of. Lamar went to prison and did like 5 years for scamming, classic Brooklyn type of crime, right? Identity theft. The type of hell you put a person through when you do identity theft, I mean, that can take years and years of correcting, undoing, trying to clear your name, all kinds of stuff. I know somebody that recently had to do some jail time because someone had forged some checks and stole their identity. There's some crazy stuff like that within the last 5 years or so. But ended up spending time in jail.
Wait, the Koku Tales. I'm like, wait, is that, I know
people from all walks. I know somebody allegedly,
allegedly.
who had to do time because somebody got him like that. You know what I'm saying? They might have left something laying around, whatever, the person just had that kind of information on them. And I guess the only thing that saved him in this instance was that there was surveillance that showed he was not the person that did the crime. But he spent a little time in jail just trying to figure something out, and he didn't necessarily have the resources right away to be able to clear his name. So whether that was a day in jail, a month in jail, or 6 months in jail, it's still, he should never have been locked up because somebody stole his identity and now he just looks like a criminal. And the way they caught him was that he was speeding or something like that. So on a traffic stop, he had no idea this was out there like that. On a traffic stop, they ran his information, and that's when he found out there was a warrant out for his arrest.
Wow. I mean,
that's the world we live in.
I mean, I think when you talk about Brooklyn, because like, first of all, the Brooklyn soundtrack outside is about to get our video flagged because like the sound system of the Calypso that just rode by is and rattled the entire ground floor of the house. But like when you talk about Brooklyn and like scamming, like this is a specialty. Like the Bronx gets a lot of flack for the Bronxy things that happen. But Brooklyn is like, I feel like we're the capital of credit card fraud. Like it is
absolutely.
It's no secret that like Fulton Mall and like, all the Barclays, like all of these hubs in Brooklyn are basically like scammer, like proving grounds and have been for a very long time. And so for someone to, it's kind of admirable for someone who's like a former convict to redeem himself, so to speak, and find
and we've well, yeah, I know, right? If you can find a new finesse in a way that you can package it well and people don't I mean, and let's also be clear. I know we know people that have gone to prison for any amount of time. And matter of fact, I met somebody last night. This man did 23 years in prison, and we had such an interesting conversation. Yes.
Wow.
And
what was he talking about? What did he go up for?
So you know what? That's the only question I didn't ask him because I didn't want to maybe recall something bad in it. But he was working security at this place, and I was like, I don't want my attitude towards him to change if I find out like, he burned the house down and 15 people got killed. Like, I don't really know. But as we were talking about it, he was working security. It was like just a really casual conversation. And he was just saying like, it was like a story of redemption. He was like, yo, and it's so funny because many people I know that have gone to prison that come out, they're the most like chill people, like nothing seems to bother them, because again, it's someone who knows what they're capable of. So they know what's absolutely not worth it at the same time. And that was the energy that I got out of that from him. So there are people that, because he's like, yo, I'm just happy to be free, happy to be out. Like, it was just a really cool conversation. But I know that's neither here nor there in that sense. But again, to your point, there are people that, their brains are just wired for grift. What's the next hustle?
I mean, same skill set, right? It's very transferable. Where he's like, yo, I'm going to fake an identity. So at first he did it in sort of like the rough draft way, and now he's like, I'm going to fake of like divine love in order to get the same money I was going to get just stealing. I'm very curious about this conversation though, because would it have changed the conversation if he was like, yeah, I was a pickpocket?
Yeah, I think so.
You know what I'm
Because
saying? Like,
that's why I very deliberately didn't want
that's
to
good.
know. I know that something very good came out of the conversation for me.
That's
It was
brave.
just more so like, some stuff is just not worth, putting any energy into. So I knew that was definitely a great takeaway, and I would not have had that kind of takeaway had I found out that the crime was something that was just against my own moral principles.
That's dope, man. I mean, I think like I'm all for actually finding the takeaway.
Mhm.
And I guess that the robber who hit up Lamor, he took away something as well. And I'm glad that he found his purpose in robbing
How,
and
how
getting
are
the
you
checks
gonna,
on the live stream.
how are you gonna offload something so specific though?
Yo, that's yo, for real. Like honestly, I feel
Like
like the
like
streets.
a iced out
Yeah,
bishop
like a
chain or
very
something
like
like
it
that.
probably says Lamore. It probably says like LW.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
but the streets wanted that. Like, if he jukes you like that in front of your congregation, the streets put you up to that as kind of like an act of
yeah.
justice. Like that seems like a Robin Hood type of thing, and like somebody out there is willing to pay that bounty. You know what I mean? Even
Or
if you have to sell it back to him,
oh yeah, that happens all the time when people get their
right?
chain snatched. Someone that's so-called, the kind of the go-to or the liaison between
Mhm.
the criminal element and the victim.
Right,
Usually will probably even take their own percentage to get you your chain back.
right,
Obviously you're not paying the same thing you pay for your chain, but you're paying them something for, for your safety. And then
right.
you get your chain back. They make sure that they facilitate that. But in this particular case, I just think that he was just like, look, I got a scam, I got a hustle. Y'all already know what time it is on Jesus' name. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And he called up somebody that was willing to go ahead and do this crime, and they're gonna split that shit 50-50 when they do that insurance claim. That's all that
Exactly.
is. That's
Exactly.
all that is.
And it's a form of involuntary tithing in this case, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you had to pay, somebody had to pay up, and it turned out to be the preacher this time. He'll make that back in a couple Sundays. We know how that goes.
Oh, for sure.
um and like, okay, so I like speaking of men who have a pillar position in the community and
Mm-hmm.
are like clear scammers, snakes, and grifters. But then there are men, like our next topic, who are
Mm-hmm.
actually pillars of the community, controversial though they are, large flocks of their own, but actually are pretty upstanding guys. And I want to say big Black Hebrew Israelite Mazel Tov to Nick Cannon. He had his eighth child. When was
Eighth
that?
baby.
What was that?
I,
Yesterday?
I I feel like it might have been like last night. It was a home birth, and
Wow.
she was praising him for being there, and I'm just like, that's I would expect that. So that's an interesting.
Is this the same one who was like, where he put up the Instagram post like, "Hey, everyone's been telling me I might as well." Like, is this the same one? He was like, I mean, it's not too late, I guess. Like, when he put the ring on her finger with the very underhanded Instagram caption. Is this
Oh,
that
you
same
know what?
baby mother?
You know what? That is from a still or some sort of a slide or clip from a video. So
Oh,
he was actually making fun of himself in that. Yeah.
okay,
Nick Cannon has married no one. He's just continued to fertilize the uteruses of the earth.
okay. Yo,
Mhm.
and I looked at, when I saw the People article, I looked at the baby names. Have you seen the baby names
You were
of Nick
telling me
Cannon's children?
what are the baby names? Yeah, I'd like
Okay,
to know.
so there's like Zion,
Mm.
Zillionaire, not Zillionaire, Zillion Air,
Oh, and an heir as in okay,
like
like an
heir to
heir.
the Nick Cannon fortune,
Oh.
right?
Hmm,
Um,
hmm.
Powerful Queen is one of the names. First of all, I feel like when dudes holler at you on the street, that's kind of what they say. They're like,
I
"Yo,
mean, that's definitely
powerful
like
Queen."
that's definitely Fortune and Flatbush, I'll be square mile
Yes,
energy. Definitely,
yeah,
yeah, the powerful
absolutely.
queen. Yeah,
Empress, you know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah. No, like
Empress.
Empress is like that's the Church Ave, Church of East 18th kind of. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's Empress.
absolutely. And then the most recent child who I think like takes it for all of the baby names is Legendary.
Oh, legendary. Legend. I could have went with that. Legendary is interesting.
Legendary.
Yeah,
Right.
that's interesting. Hmm.
Yeah, I actually grew up speaking of Brooklyn and like strange and small religious traditions. So I grew up around a lot of five percenters. And when I
Hmm.
was in high school, I was on a high school track team. I was not good. I was an alternate on the track team. I think just because I'm Jamaican, I think they was
Mm.
just like,
They just
we're gonna
yeah.
see what potential's there. Um,
Hmm.
but there was, on our rival school's track team, there was a guy named I Perfection. Immaculate Perfection was his name, but he went by I Perfection.
Really?
Yeah, and like Nick Cannon gives me like big Hotep vibes, like same type of like 5%er energy, like with all those names, Zion and like, you know, Queen Empress and like legendary the Most High and like, you know, Selassie I lift it every time. You know what I'm saying? Like he's very
Well,
like,
I guess. Well, I mean, I think that we're, you know, everybody's kind of we're all complicated in some way. So, but it's like Nick Cannon, I definitely agree with you on that he does give me those Hotep vibes. But when I look at these different partners that he chooses, they don't seem like they have that kind of education or interest. I mean,
no,
just again, this
no.
is me just making assumptions. I don't know anything about these women, but they don't seem like that at all. So why are these women so opposite that? Is he trying to impress that type of language and literature upon them, or that thinking? I
Something
mean,
like that.
yeah, maybe
Something
that.
like that. He's a prophet,
So,
you know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
so maybe he's a 5%er and he's out here to give those 85%. Maybe there's a mathematical equation here
There you
where
go.
it is his job, right, to
There
go
you go.
ahead and impregnate the 85% so that
Right,
he can then of course enrich the world
right.
with all of this with all of his progeny.
My
That's
seeds, marry his seeds,
yeah,
run with his
see,
seeds. That's how we keep, you know what I'm saying?
the family, yeah.
Right, the Wu-Tang prophecy. I think
Yeah.
the great thing about Nick Cannon though is like his it's weird because like you would think with the career that he has, he wouldn't be like that, right? Like the
Yeah.
religious and spiritual beliefs that he espouses are like the dudes that I grow up with who have like 200 Instagram followers and are a little like weird and they just got out, you know what I'm saying? Like that's a very like I would say fringe belief system for someone who's literally like hosting The Voice in his day job. Like he's like wilding out on MTV, The Voice, like all like he's on 94.7 The Block now. He has like a
Right,
whole like so I'm like he has a very mainstream kind of clean cut like straight down the middle career and like meanwhile he's like Whitney and Bobby's religious beliefs. It's very like it's Hollywood for sure. Like that, like in that
right.
way, it's on the nose,
Yeah.
but it's still it's like way outside of like NBC Universal. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm gonna say this. I believe. Well, first of all, if you do a little digging and find out, Nick Cannon's daddy is a gangster, like for real. Like
Yeah,
he,
really.
yeah, no, for sure. So that of course, and just the way Nick Cannon's life has played out in terms of his successes as well too, it would just I believe that someone like that is probably a little bit more curious of the world than people would think.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
also with the level of success that he's had, I mean, that doesn't come easy. None of that
Right.
none of that just happened. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like Nick Cannon has a very, very strong executive producer mind, and he
Yes.
knows how to
Yes.
assemble people and get people together. And there's a lot that goes into that. I do believe, and now how he processes information is one thing, but I do believe this is a person that, you know, whether or not I agree with any of his beliefs or his insistence of, you know, populating the world in this manner, you know, it doesn't really matter,
Depopulating.
right? You know, it's just, you know, this sort of eugenics phase, you know, he's in his eugenics bag, his
Yeah,
eugenics
yeah,
era. Whether or not I believe in that, I do believe that
yeah. The Nick Cannon eugenics era. Oh my God.
I'm just saying,
Oh my
I
God.
I believe that Nick is someone that, you know, probably has read books that might surprise people and that he
Yes.
probably has some really like
Yeah.
informed insight on things that people wouldn't necessarily expect because again, all they may be seeing is like The Voice or like, you know, The Masked Singer and things like that, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, okay, books that might surprise people. I'm not counting 48 Laws of
We're not
Power.
talking about 40 Law Tower. We're not talking about the New World Order. We're not
Yeah,
talking about the ISIS papers.
yeah, the
Those
Behold
sort
the
of like
Pale Horse.
right,
I don't think that's
Hotep
not
101.
necessarily that, but I do agree with you that he's probably
Mm,
read some books that would surprise us, and that
mm.
you know, I think also like you're saying, and like I mentioned earlier, like he's upstanding, like he is someone who I see as generous, philanthropic. Like he
Yeah,
put
I think so.
Kaylani on, right? Like he basically like took Kaylani under his wing and like not on
Yeah.
some sleazy shit. Um, I guess it begs the question: is Nick Cannon trying to buy NBC?
Well,
I mean, like if a scandal arises, will that now be like, will that align all the like Hotep factors to show that like actually he was trying to like get everybody's third eye focused on the goal and repopulating and taking back control of our media. Lots of things I see on my Instagram, but I actually
because
believe that he is good natured and he's like
I do.
principled.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, if really the only crime that Nick Cannon ever committed to people where he would constantly, at some point he stopped trying to prove himself, I think, was just the idea that he was like this corny dude. That's why I always just kind of laugh, because media just has this perception of people sometimes, or the press will allow that sort of narrative to be told about a person, and then it's like when you find out who's around them, it's always a different story. I mean, the same thing happened to MC Hammer. They'll say all these kind of things, but say
he
one,
was
a lot
Hammer
of
was banging.
Yeah. Anybody that knows Hammer, that's been around Hammer, that knows his pedigree, knows that he's far more, like I'm not saying he's in the streets, he's a family man, of course, but he just ain't to be played with like that. You know what I mean?
You'll get the person who will cut you. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like he won't do it himself.
Yeah, it's just, it's just kind of wild how people talk so crazy about people. But I mean, again, so the biggest crime that Nick Cannon ever committed, prior to this, was people just thinking he was corny. And now all you can really say is that he's just, everybody's pregnant.
Yeah.
So it's like,
right.
I mean, is that a crime? I don't know if he's able to take care of the family.
Listen, it's not.
I don't know.
Listen, it's like people were saying if it was Elon Musk, which it is.
It is. Elon Musk has 10 kids. Yeah, it literally is. Yeah.
We wouldn't be having that kind of conversation about him. It's sort of like the way that people try to flip it on someone who has a pretty good image and has everything kind of together. It's like, well, then you want to imagine them as something bad when they're not. So I am curious whether or not Legendary is a boy or a girl, because Legendary could go both ways, which makes me believe or wonder, will Legendary be non-binary? Will Nick Cannon raise Legendary as a non-binary child?
That's a very interesting question. We're living in a world right now where people don't want to get anything wrong. I think that it's important to know. I think we can all, I mean, most people anyway, can agree that there is definitely a spectrum, right? When it comes to gender identity, sexuality, even just everything that's been involved in this type of conversation. And I am in support of anyone that really wants to express themselves however they want to. If someone's has truly inside has never identified with outwardly how they were born, I can empathize with a person like that, and I want them to be happy, and I want them to be able to express themselves internally and outwardly the way that they feel they need to. So I'm not here to say that I don't agree with that. I just think that how we introduce these conversations, sometimes we're just so overly concerned with not hurting people, that we are really entering like a murky territory where there's just so much confusion that people don't even know what's what anymore, and that's the problem, is that we're not healthy in our dialogue and how we're choosing to really approach this just entirely, like in totality.
So what's an example like of this sort of like swinging the pendulum too far that I want to
understand? So a really perfect example of this is I happened upon a YouTube video where this family is raising all of their children, and the children are being raised without gender. And so none of the kids are I mean, this is just from the onset. None of the kids are male or female. One of the children, I believe that kid was like maybe like 10 or 11. And she was also saying that she was non-binary at that age. And this is where it got prickly for me, because it absolutely could be true, and which is absolutely fine. But I wasn't sure if she was doing this because her parents, she wanted to please their agenda. In this case, I feel like it was agenda based.
Okay. How about this? When you label she, like, is that what's happening in the video? Like, is like the family or is the child like fully on like they and Z? Like, is the child already in that mindset?
The child is fully in a mindset where they seem to completely understand the gender identity, and and I don't know if it's because they understand, if they're parroting their parents' agenda in this case.
Right.
But the child seemed fully aware. They seemed to comprehend what this was about and identified as non-binary in that.
Got you. Okay. And so I have a couple points about this. One, I do recognize that when there's a power dynamic, just like when we talk about, like, when I had a friend who was like arguing me down about the Louis C.K. incident and like why Louis C.K. was like exiled from the comedy community. And her point kept being like, no, Louis C.K. didn't do anything wrong because those women consented, like they knew what he was doing and they consented. They were in that room. They knew what they were doing. They were in that room, etc. Right. And I kept pointing out, like, well, when there's a power dynamic, that's compromised. Like consent is compromised when there's a power dynamic. Right. And so
that's correct.
I think when you have parents and children, right, which is there's age, there's authority, that power dynamic can be abused. Now, whether or not that's the case in this YouTube video, I think I have a couple follow-up questions. One, was the family white?
Yes.
Okay, so, all right, I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical mainly because I think there are white folks and white families who would rather appear and like virtue signal around an issue like gender than take up like actual ground level causes in their lives that would make a difference. So I realized that, like, one of the problems that a lot of Black women and Black feminists have with white folks and white women and white feminists is that they take up those issues in ways that are very surface level, right? That like in terms of like, you know, in the 60s was bra burning. And in this current day and age, it's more about like, you know, girl bossing and like whether or not you should have to wear makeup, like very superficial issues as it pertains to women. And by superficial, I mean exactly that, like appearance-based issues, like the problems of the petite bourgeoisie, like people who already have something, and they're not talking about like the women in India who don't make a working wage, they don't make a living wage, but they're like sewing all our clothes, and they're also abused at home domestically, and the laws are skewed out of their favor, and India like suppresses families that have more than one girl. So they're not talking about that. They're more talking about like, well, how can I lean in? Like, how can I make it from like middle management to the C-suite? Like that's the form of feminism that they're often advocating for. And I think with a family like this, because they're white, right? And and you said there was like a YouTube video about them.
Yeah. I'll actually maybe I should link it. I'll link it in the comments.
Right. But so it's like they're also like in content, you know what I mean? Like there are a lot of like suspicious parts of like why they're doing this that make me feel like these kids are it's giving those, remember those white ladies who adopted them Black kids and drove them off the cliff?
Yes, and they drove out and killed the kids. Yes.
Yeah, it's giving that kind of energy where
that's what I got out of this.
You know,
and
what
again,
I'm saying? Like,
this is one family. This is not to say that this is what's happening all the time. And it's really kind of, it's absolutely unfair to make this seem like the which is why, like when we were talking the other video, we were talking about that trans woman who impregnated the 2 inmates. It's happening, like, you know, if this was happening all the time, we'd have many, many more cases. So these are those kind of those fringe, odd one-offs that, you know, obviously when it's something like this, we're going to talk about it more. But yes, I immediately thought about those women that killed those Black children. And I actually thought about many of the times where people will just, you know, sort of take on that white savior role and go adopt children in these African villages, but then not even raise those children. And again, this kind of goes back to what I'm saying here, because to some extent, like, just you need to let people form their own personalities and be who they are. So when someone says like, you know, I don't see color, you know, these are my children, this is my family. You know, you can say that as a white person. A Black person that has no real sense of identity with regards to their culture, that is very damaging, really. I mean, because you know, we can't afford to not see color. You know, that's literally could be a life or death kind of thing when we don't consider that, you know, within our day to day.
Well, I mean, I want to ground this in a gender-based struggle too, because I think one of the things that we talked about, like one of our initial conversations actually launched this podcast, which was really, really dope, was about like, would Katie be a basketball player? Like in another version, another dimension of the universe, he's born in the same body and he's like he's 7 feet tall, he's super lanky, like he has a body that was like, for the reasons of this world only, was like built for basketball. Like, and no one, you can't like, you can't roll dice or buy a lottery ticket for that. It's just one of those one in hundreds of millions coincidence where a person who's literally born to do something is actually really good at it too. And I feel like there's a parallel when it comes to gender, which is to say, like, although you personally didn't feel any pressure as like a so-called tomboy, I think there are probably more women and more young men who felt pressure. I know I felt pressure to be a certain kind of masculine as I was coming up.
I think and when we talk about especially children, I do think that men, and I'll speak specifically about Black men, have a much more difficult time trying to you have to deal with like hyper masculine expectations. You can't just exist and just chill. Like people really want you guys to fight. They want you guys to be like super like, you know, aggressive, and, you know, even like people might urge that you're bullying or intimidating. That's kind of how it's like, you know, my boy's not tough enough. I've seen situations where I've seen a father like literally like, you know, like how people like will kind of like slap box, but not even that. Like I've seen dudes where they'll like really be like, and I've seen it, but they'll be punching the kid like, yo, man up. And be dead ass, right? You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of dudes have had to deal with that trauma. Like, yo, I never even wanted to box, or I never wanted to fight, or like that was never me. But a lot of dudes have had to kind of play like where sometimes when they're around the presence of men, even like the posturing, you'll see sometimes people are kind of like, you know, and sort of just play this role like it's so much easier to just, you know, kind of do this.
Who's okay, there's a clip that you really reminded me of. I just saw this clip. It's not it's like I'm taking us on a little bit of a tangent here, but the guy who used to do the I Am Athlete podcast, but he's split off and he's doing another podcast. He had Kevin Hart on his thing. I think his name is like Channing something. I can't remember his name, but he's like light-skinned dude who wears braids. He has braids or twists or whatever. Anyway, he has Kevin Hart on his podcast, and he starts talking about how he and his wife go to nudist resorts in their free time. And because that podcast is set up like The Shop and other like kind of athlete male podcasts, Kevin immediately starts like, you know, going in like shading him like, wait, so what are y'all doing at this nudist colony? Like, what is your wife about? Like, and then the dude is talking about how he's getting salad at the buffet and he don't want his dick to be by somebody's butt cheeks, and it immediately became like there's like referendum on how masculine he is. But he already kind of he did jump out the window and say like, look, I was at nudist colonies, right? Which is it was just in that space going to go against a lot of what people are used to talking about acceptably, right? And so I do agree that like Black men have a specific kind of dilemma and problem that can be really hard to navigate. But I would say that Black women similarly have a specific dilemma and problem around the gender binary that they have to navigate. And I really want to like zero in on this like tomboy thing, especially as it relates to these Olympic athletes, right? So like Caster Semenya is one of the world's greatest runners. And Caster Semenya might be, based on the current sex and gender spectrum that we have, might be considered someone that is intersex.
Yeah, I think that would be,
right. Now, mind you, intersex could mean many things biologically and physically. I'm not going to go into what Caster Semenya's genitals look like, but she identifies as a woman, right?
Yes,
all through her teen years, like, and I read a lot about her. There was a New Yorker profile article on her that was really, really thorough. But like, imagine you're 14, you're the best runner in your country, you're dominating, and as you get to the highest levels, people are like, but can I see your pussy? Like, but can I make sure you have a pussy, right? Now, based on all accounts, there are so many markers of the prototypical female gender of Caster Semenya that I don't think you could reasonably put Caster Semenya in a man's race and use those biological markers to say that this is by this threshold a man and therefore should compete as a man. But I also feel like there is some credibility to the point that unless we're doing mixed races, which might be a solution, like we might need to mix the genders in this case if this is like such a messy thing and so many people exist on different parts of the gender spectrum.
I think
like,
that would definitely depend on the sport, though. I still
it
don't
would
agree
absolutely
that. Yeah,
absolutely. Like track and field is really tough, right? Because
yeah,
there's a gap that's based on certain biological markers, right?
right,
But however, you know, if you did something like mixed relays, right, where it's like,
right,
okay, 2 and 2, there's two of the fastest so-called men, two of the fastest so-called women. But the reason why I bring up the Caster Semenya case is because, and these women who had their, or who are having their medals taken away, is like, there are so many biological expressions of like what a human can be. When we
right.
start to like parse that, it gets much trickier, because it's like, I've met you in person, Cokes. Like, I know a lot of niggas you would dunk on. Like, you are taller, stronger, and more athletic than most women, for sure, right, that I've ever met, and probably than a lot of men. And that would make some men, maybe men who are on the IOC in this case, maybe men who are athletes themselves, it might make some men basically Clarence Thomas you, hate on you, right, because of their own insecurities. And that's not fair to you. But if those people are in positions of power, that's essentially what they can do. They can say like, yo, like Serena Williams, we don't like that she's stronger than the competition.
Yeah, that's true.
And so we can treat her in this way. And so Black women have this specific dilemma where it's like, you can't be, you have to be pretty, but not fast. You know what I mean? You have to be alluring and sexual, but not aggressive, not assertive. You have to be strong and independent Black woman, but not a bitch. Like, so you start to get the narrower and narrower and narrower as these seemingly contradictory things that you have to be all at once kind of collapse in on you. And I think gender is one of those spaces, is what I'll say. Like, now, this white family in the YouTube, fuck them, like, cause y'all are giving real creep vibes, like, very much like out of a book gender.
I mean, there were people in the comments that were commenting that were trans themselves. They were like, this don't sound right to me. And I'm trans type of thing. So there was a lot of balanced feedback, right? There was a lot of balanced feedback in those comments that showed that they knew that these people were clearly outliers. They're not the, you know, sort of the standard in that type of thinking. But yeah, this was just, it was just a very, very interesting, it was just an interesting watch. Like,
here's the thing. If I'm really gonna break it down, yo, white people gentrify gender fluidity. Because like African societies, ancient African societies have had concepts of gender fluidity since time, in fact, in an essay I read recently, and was like going through African spiritual traditions, one of the ways that people dubbed someone like a priestess or a priest was if they had some sort of like masculine, feminine, or androgynous energy. So because those people were considered wise in ancient societies, right? And then gender fluidity was also considered like this gateway to the afterlife, right? So like people who could like oversee your transition from life to death were usually people who were like gender fluid or gender queer. And that's before Europeans, that's before Greece. So the way that we have like misconstrued gender, especially along racial lines, especially in the Black diaspora, I find really funny. It's like, it's ironic that like, especially like Hoteps and like this whole like worship of Egypt, it's a very like hyper masculine idea that comes from Western civilization, which is kind of crazy, when in fact the early civilizations were very much like either matriarchal or gender fluid.
I was also even looking at something. I was on YouTube doing my usual. The algorithm is crazy, you know. And I saw this video on these Afghan dancing boys, and this is wild. So these children in this instance are because you don't want to defile women within this particular segment of society. So what they do is they sexualize these boys and they put makeup on them and they dance for them. And they become these sexual objects. And so they kind of just get pulled into this life. And a lot of these families that are willing to agree to this, they kind of sell their children. They're so poor. they kind of just really have no other choice but to accept that this is their fate, because they really they don't have any resources. So, you know, it's almost like when you see people like sell their children into sex trafficking. I mean, you know, you want to immediately say like, what kind of parent would do that? But we also do not know what it's like to struggle on that kind of level, to know where a person is so low and has so little that this is actually something that they have to even consider for themselves.
That's
In the instance of these boys, what happens is once they get too old for this job, let's say like, I think it was like 22 or 23, maybe something like that. They just kind of just throw them back out into the world. And these men eventually just start families, and it's like nothing ever happened kind of thing. There's no addressing the trauma. There's no addressing the confusion. It's just like, you know, yes, I used to be a dancing boy, and I don't even know if that even gets discussed within those households, but it's just something that happened. And even we don't even know if something like that lends to confusion for that person, where maybe they become, because I always say this too. I think what a lot of people don't understand, especially with like, you know, sexuality and things like that. I mean, that's why I think that when we talk about instances of people maybe being gay for the stay when they go to prison, is
or trade,
right, exactly. It's like, you know, with, I think the thing that happens too, especially with sex, like certain sexual acts can be done, you know, we're talking about, and I'm talking right now in a consensual circumstance, but certain sexual acts can be done where regardless of who's doing it, it's going to feel good to the person. Where the difference comes in is where mentally how you process it. Like, are you attracted to them, or do you just appreciate or like the sensation? So when you take someone so young, going back to that conversation, and you teach this person, you know, sexual behaviors or what they're doing now, and then you just throw them back out into the world, like, what does their world become? Who do they think that they are? What do they believe that they know? Like, how does that affect you and your development as a person?
No, I mean, it's actually a messy conversation. Like, that's why I like the fact that we're talking about gender on a spectrum, and like how transitioning and like transitioning from M to F or F to M, or deciding not to be on the gender binary specifically. Like, you can be on the gender spectrum and not be a part of a gender binary. But there's a really great novel called Detransition Baby. And it is about, like, so the author is a trans man, right? And the author is writing specifically about this experience that's become a lot more common, right? That you're talking about, kind of, that sprung from this comment section, that people who transitioned to the other gender, or who identify as trans, there are a lot of people who go back, who have traumatic experiences, who have unpleasant experiences, and they decide like, okay, this wasn't for me. I thought it was, but my gender identity wasn't what I thought it was.
Exactly. And I think that that's a lot of what a lot of parents are also, they're trying to sort of make right, or they want to make sure that they're supportive in the best way. So really it's definitely a struggle for some people, because that could happen, right? That definitely could happen. But then it's like, what do you do when you've gone to sort of a point of no return, where maybe there's some sort of like surgeries that can't be reversed, or things of that nature? What does that do to the person in that instance? You know, if they decide they want to detransition. And again, parents just want, you know, a lot of parents just want to do the right thing. They want to be supportive. And with a question like that, you know, you just don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. So it's like, you don't know what you should or shouldn't do.
Right. So if you are like infused with this early belief system about being on a gender binary and kind of like escaping from that, and that influences you then to make decisions when your frontal lobe isn't fucking developed, like when you're 16 and you decide like, okay, I'm going to transition from this biological marker sex to that one. Then if you decide when you're 25 that that's not really what you meant to do, you know what I mean? Like, and not to say it's the same as getting tattoos at 16, you know what I mean? Or going to what was it, Ricky's, and like, you know, getting your earrings, your ears pierced. It's not the same as that, but there are things that you do when your brain isn't fully developed that it wouldn't really make sense to decide majorly at that point in your life, right? So I definitely feel you on that, where it's like gender dysphoria, or feeling like you're not part of the gender binary that's been established. those are real things, right? Those are real experiences that people have and will continue to have as long as there's a gender spectrum. But when your parents are specifically influencing you strongly in one direction, I feel like just the same way my parents influenced me strongly in the direction of like hypermasculinity and things like that. I don't think strong in any one direction is good. Like when, like if these things are a spectrum, very strong in one direction might not be serving us. I wanted to kind of jump into, because we talked about like kind of the origins of gender fluidity in Africa, and like Africa, we just come back to Africa in every conversation.
We always come back to Africa.
We always come back to Africa. Like there's a video I saw of a woman named Toby Amusan who actually just won 100-meter hurdles and set the world record. And I'm tight. I'm mad because, you know what I'm saying? Like I don't want Nigerians, I don't want Africans winning shit in areas where Jamaicans was winning. And like it feels like Africans, like y'all don't really stop with the like plunder, you know what I'm saying? Like y'all take everything, and I'm kind of like tired of all the taking, you know what I mean?
Listen, you got a lot of those kids, especially like those Kenyans, long distance runners. Like some of these people were running barefoot, okay?
Fam.
So hit that damn,
you don't have to keep running on that.
Hit that pavement, get them blisters up, you know what I'm saying? Work on your momentum.
Yo, we in trench town sprinting across rocky roads too. We on the sand, running miles on the beach, you know what I'm saying? We don't have it easy either, you know what I'm saying? This is easy living for sure. But I feel like Africans, like once they start taking some shit, they don't stop. You know, like I feel like we had dance hall on the radio, we was good. Like we was like Bobby Conda's Anjaba, you know, we had like very like kind of like established blocks, and now it's like Afro beats. Every time I turn on, it's like Burna Boy, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, I'm not pleased.
The turn to Afro beats has been the most fascinating one that I've seen in my entire lifetime. I truly believe that, because like you said, any party is going to have the standard. We're going to get the soca, we're going to get the reggae, couple of the hip hop songs. Of course, it's going to be some like Jamaican spin on some Celine Dion records. You know what I'm saying? So it's always that.
Yo, don't come for us like that. Don't come for our
y'all know y'all love you some y'all love y'all Celine Dion. It's wild, right?
Real.
But it's like then it's just like the whole world was on Afrobeat, and it's just, I never thought that music would go in this direction. I mean, I like Afrobeats as much as the next person, but I just didn't see that happening in this way, that where Afrobeats would dominate everything. I definitely never saw that.
Like I knew we was in trouble when like dance hall started to sound like Afro beats. Like it used to be the other way around. You know what I mean? Like it was like all kinds of like raga and reggaeton that was sounding like reggae and dance hall. And then it kind of like there was a shift that happened, and now dance hall is sounding like Afro beats. I do feel like there's a line to be drawn, and the line I draw, and like forgive me for this, like it's gonna get hairy when we go into this topic, but I don't feel like, and maybe this is my truth, I don't know, like I'm not sure.
Is this your truth?
This might be my truth, but I don't think that African-born creators and artists should tell African American stories of trauma. I feel like you are in this industry, you know cinema really well, and the Emmett Till movie is coming out. I actually saw the previews for Till when I was going to see Nope by Jordan Peele, which is like, that's a beautiful moment. Like you in a Black film and you see another Black film's trailer. The Till movie, I have a lot of thoughts about what it's portraying, but the thing that I feel like rattled me to my core was that when I saw the filmmakers' names, I was like, oh, that was like Chukwu. It was like Chukwudi.
Yeah,
no. That's not for the Emmett Till story, bro. Like y'all gotta really, like y'all Africans don't stop, yo. Like,
so let's give some background here. So okay, so what he's talking about, the Till movie that's coming out, the trailer is available. So if you haven't seen it, you can see it. It is out there. The director of the movie, her name is Chinonye Chukwu. She's Nigerian born. And this is where it gets really interesting. I knew we were going to have this conversation somewhere, somehow, some way. I knew this was going to come up, and I really, really am curious as to whether or not she was prepared for this, because it's actually this not only started with this. Before we even get there, this has also been a discussion when we talk about UK-born British actors and people saying that they're taking over African-American roles. It's a conversation that we've seen. We've seen it with Daniel Kaluuya playing Fred Hampton. We saw it with, as far back as like Idris on The Wire. And there's just so many instances where we'll be like, well, hold on, so-and-so was born in London, or they're from the UK, or this and that. So there's a lot of that. So it is something that I do believe that it's not an unusual or a unfair question to wonder why Cynthia Erivo is playing Aretha Franklin.
Right. Or Harriet Tubman.
Right, exactly. Those are.
Is she even the best actor? Like is that person even the best actor to play in that role? Like, okay, it's now with the Judas discussion. I when it came up, right? Because I have a friend who's the writer director of Judas and the Black Messiah, Shaka King, and I was obviously elated when Daniel Kaluuya was cast, because he's hands down one of the best actors in Hollywood. He
nailed that role. Like the way he was able to tap into Fred Hampton's accent, you cannot say that he did that role tremendous justice. He did what he was supposed to do.
He did his homework. He did exactly what he brought the intensity to it. There are even some African American folks who I know who would disagree with you on the accent point, but I don't necessarily. And I think that that is kind of the point, right? Which is who gets to tell those stories, who gets to be the sort of not the gatekeeper, but although gatekeepers are the reason, but who's like the arbitrator, who's the person who can give it authority and truth and authenticity. And I think that that is starting to come up for me, even as a Caribbean immigrant, where I'm actually we are the world, one Africa, Pan-African, all that shit, right?
Right.
I'm definitely for that. I don't think that we should be having that.
I would say I identify. No, we shouldn't. We can have Jollof Rice Wars, but we should not have diaspora wars. Okay.
Right.
And to be honest with you, just based on my own lived experience, I identify culturally as African American. It's really the only culture that I've known. It's what I've been raised in. I have that duality of being a person that's first generation, so I have that African experience. Right. But the community that raised me, those African American, just very specific experiences to being African American, whether or not that was the church, just the approach to certain things, just what we were exposed to in terms of television. Right. Or just how we lived our day-to-day. All of those things in terms of my life were more so informed by the African American experience. That's just how I grew up.
Down to things like hip hop culture too. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
As much as I have a lot of Jamaican pride, including for inventing hip hop, let's be real. But as much as I have Jamaican pride, specific Caribbean pride to living in New York City, African American culture has been seminal in shaping American culture.
Absolutely.
Soul, the blues, anything you could call rhythm, anything you could call that original shit, and that spread worldwide in a way that couldn't be replicated. But it does kind of it doesn't sit well with me. I also saw the trailer for the John Boyega movie that's coming out. John Boyega, another one of my faves. He was he's really dope. He's really humble. He has a lot of respect. And when I saw the trailer for that movie, I was like, it's giving John Q. It's giving Denzel and John Q, because I was like, oh, I've seen this before. And it's starting to make me feel the Amazon Basics version of shit is coming out. And it's with, they're using Black UK actors. And not to say Black UK actors aren't great. A lot of them are absolutely excellent. And they're born, and they are already going through a sort of translation code switching from their African, first generation African heritage and accents
to
UK accents. And then another switch into American accents. That's pretty brilliant. Not everyone can do that, but at the same time, I'm I was watching The Man Who Fell to Earth with Chiwetel Ejiofor and Naomi Harris, and it just struck me 7 episodes in. I was like, yo, these two were both born in the UK, and they're both playing African American characters, and one of them is an alien. Don't tell me you couldn't have found a Black American actor to play an alien who lands on Earth. That's a little wild. You know what I mean?
I mean, anyone in Hollywood will tell you too that the pool, the roles that are offered, it gets very, very small. And
Yeah.
when someone just is supposedly the it person of the moment,
Mhm.
that does, of course, reduce a lot of the opportunities for the people. So I think a lot of that is it's kind of actually lazy on the part of the casting directors.
Yeah.
When I say lazy, that's not to take anything, of course, away from all of the people that we've spoken about because they're all incredible actors.
You're great.
But it's like, well, we know what we're getting with that person. They're reliable. So let's just go ahead and cast them. I'm sure they have far less instances of even having to do the traditional auditioning that
No,
many,
of
many
course
people
not.
have to do day in, day out. At this particular
Right.
point, while they are auditioning, of course, for I'm sure for like bigger budget films, there's also that they're at a level now where scripts are just getting like pushed into their
Oh,
faces every day,
absolutely. Oh,
Yeah.
100%.
So
I mean,
that's also informing that.
it reminds me of the Robert Townsend movie Hollywood Shuffle, though. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh, that's one of my favorite movies.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I feel like there's a Hollywood Shuffle thing going on where if you walk in and you have a British accent in it, if you got a British accent in it, it's
In
like
it, bro.
you're gonna get the role
Yeah.
regardless because that is something that's less threatening to white folks. Like if you are a Black person who already, you're coming in with a lot of implicit biases that you're working against, and that British accent softens those biases enough so that you're getting in the door more than a Black American person. I also felt like, even though I love this show and I love this actor's portrayals in it, Damson Idris in Snowfall, it's like a classic example of like, I'm sure you could have found
Yeah.
a Bay Area dude who's a
Yeah.
promising Black actor, or a South Compton dude who's a
Someone
promising Black
that may not someone that may not have even been an actor, like someone like a
actor.
Mekhi Phifer who just kind
Yeah,
of happened to show up for
yeah,
casting for Clockers. Like,
yeah.
all right, cool,
And there
whatever.
are other actors like that in that series,
Yeah.
right? Like in
Yes. Yes.
Snowfall and in The Wire, right? Like we
Yep.
talk about the Snoops of the world, like when that's kind of how they cast those roles, and it feels like a little bit of an oversight to not find
Yeah.
those people for those roles. So I think with the Till movie, my truth is that, other than it being trauma porn, which is a whole nother topic, my truth is that don't cast, don't have an African born person telling an American story. How about that?
I think the bigger issue that people are going to have, I think when they're going to discover this, it may not just be that. For anyone that agrees with you, particularly in Chinonya's case, she is Nigerian born, but she was raised in Alaska. So I
Oh,
even think,
bro, like
yeah,
what?
so she has that experience. So when you think about it, so when you think about the African
She's
American
not even on the
experience,
mainland.
like she ain't from the contiguous United States, So it's like that is something that a lot of people, even if she was, Sheena Brown from Alaska, from Anchorage, it would still be a little bit strange to people that
Right.
someone that has that background would be talking about a story of a little boy from Chicago that was lynched in the South.
And the other
That's
thing,
still
and that's the thing, I kind of understood, and I hate to be in a position to agree with ADOS or foundational Black Americans. I hate to be in that position, but I kind of understood when people brought up the Judas story and the Fred Hampton story. I kind of understand too with the Till story. These are legends, right? Like they were built on real stories and real people's lives, but these are also legends. They're like precious stories. They're precious myths that inform the history. And I'm like, I do think we have to treat them with a little bit of like care and like the sacred stories that they are, because like actual people died, actually actual families are involved. You know what I mean? Like Lil Wayne took out his Emmett Till line because the Till family contacted him, was like, yo, bro, this history is deeper than you making a bad pussy metaphor in a rap song.
right.
And he was like, word, you know what? Let me take that out. Like, and that's the way that it's sacred to the African American community, and should be sacred to all Black folks who know the importance of that story. And so I'm like, yeah, that is a little bit like trampling on what's sacred about that story, to say, oh yeah, we'll just find homegirl from Alaska who wasn't born here to tell it. Like that's kind of whack to me.
But what if she's able to tell it in a way that actually does credit the story and provide the lens, or just in the importance, or just making, she has the blessing of the family. Let me just also say that
Okay.
she
All right.
fully, this is not one of those kind of things where it's like, the unauthorized, biopic or this kind of thing.
Right. Right.
She has the blessing of the family, and they are very proud in their choice of having her be the
I think
person
that's
that was
like,
yeah.
that's the permission level we need. We need to establish
That's all.
permission level. And if that's what happens, then I can get on board. But
Right.
if it's just like
That's
Hollywood,
not always what happens,
right.
but that's what happened here.
Yeah, that's what Shaka got. Shaka got permission from the family. He got the full buy-in of Fred Hampton Jr. A post I saw in the Shade Room, like one of my trusted authorities, that said people are talking about Glorilla needs a BBL.
Yeah.
And I'm like, first of all, who are these people? Like they found posts, they found like screenshots, like it doesn't have the number of likes on it, but I was just like, okay, like who though? And what are your thoughts on needing a BBL? Does Glorilla need a BBL? She responded. What are your thoughts on all of this?
So I don't think anybody needs a BBL. I say this quite often, and I'm being very sincere when I say this. I think whatever your body type is, if you are to, let's just say you wanted to be small or something like that, whether or not that means that the person is top heavy or they're bottom heavy, whatever the case, I think that anybody's figure, you can build up to what it is that you need to do for your body, as far as like looking the best, whether that's lean and strong or whatever. I do not think everybody has to be walking around here with cinched waists and fat asses. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just don't understand why that is the goal for everyone. What happened to just like, there's a such thing as having a nice ass, not a big ass, but it could be a nice ass. So I don't understand why everybody thinks that the excess that's being sold, if you don't have that you should be insecure about it. And I just have a real problem with forcing people to have like body identity issues because of whatever is the standard. I mean, look at the Kardashians now. Now they're getting their BBLs removed.
Reduced, right?
Seemingly, like, whomever allegedly has implants, there seems to be like breast reductions going on around here.
Yeah.
And they have, they have transitioned back into whiteness.
They detransitioned. I mean, like, okay, Dr. Miami, I would say he has a lot to do with it because like usually like Dr. Miami got these women out here getting the wish.com BBLs. Like they're trying to like they see the version that he does and they go on Wish and they try to get like a close approximation, but they be in JFK airport like struggling, like not able to sit down in wheelchairs and shit. Like I've seen it and it's painful looking, right? I think you came up with this this rubric for how to tell a BBL that I actually found quite reliable. So before I even knew how to spot one, like I knew there would be ones that were unnatural and that they were obvious, but then there were some, when you get good work done, when you go to Colombia, you know what I'm saying? Some people be in Medellin, they be in Bogota getting the good ones, like, but you created the tooth rubric. And I want you to explain to the good audience, like what the tooth rubric is in terms of detecting a BBL when you see it.
Sure. Well, one of the things that I can tell when somebody has a BBL is actually the shape. I mean, there are plenty of people on this earth that do have naturally genetically large asses. I happen to be one of them. You know what I'm saying? Right, but there's a perfection sometimes in some of these BBLs where they're just not the way someone's butt would actually be. Right. Like a lot of people's, so you could tell just by the shape. You could tell by the movements. And actually, I want to go back to you brought up Dr. Miami because Dr. Miami has had incredible success because of the advent of social media and like Instagram and Reels and the TikTok and things like that. That's very, very favorable for his type of business, right? Yes. But prior to that, people were getting stuff done in like motels, and like shady like offices or basements, and these people were not medical professionals. They're putting like like silicone, whether that's medical grade silicone or some silicone from Home Depot, and they're pumping on these people's butts, because these women felt like they just weren't measuring up. In some instances, maybe they were in like the strip club, or maybe they were doing like sex work or anything like that. And in some instances, I've seen people get these kinds of procedures where, prior to this, this BBL becoming so popular, it's like people just round the way down the block, just like, yo, I just need to, I just need to get some ass shots, or I need to get this done. So it's become something that's so normal now. Even when you get into like talking about like veneers, right? Normally you would think that's a celebrity thing, but now, you know,
No.
average, you
Years
know,
out here, yo.
yeah, like people just like the guy that works at Best Buy is going to fly to Colombia now and just get veneers, you know. Like I said, I mean, do whatever makes you happy, but some of this work, it's not being researched very well, and people are getting procedures that are very dangerous. Taking it back to, again, like sort of the tails. There are also just things that, you know, that kind of don't make sense. Like how could, like there's a natural sort of fluidity to having that kind of a large ass
Yeah.
that would, the thighs would be complementary. But
Right.
we've got people sitting on these huge like basketball booties and then having like you know, Q-tip thighs.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
Looking like wingettes. They're looking like
Yeah, it just
drumsticks.
literally,
you know what I'm
yeah, they're
saying?
looking like, you know, or like wisdom teeth, you know.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, seriously, it's like you look like an extracted wisdom tooth. Are you happy with this? And then what happens? Because you know what, I'm gonna tell you what. There's a couple of things in my life that I think about, right? One of the things I've always told myself, I wish at 18 years old, I told myself like, yo, just go work for the MTA or go work for the Department of Sanitation. You know what I'm saying? Then when you get older, you'll turn out, you have a nice little pension, something like that. Then the second thing I've told myself is like, man, can you imagine like, you know, I'm telling you, before 40 years old, you know what I'm saying? You'd have put in like 20 some odd years of work.
No, but for real though, G, like that pension is great, yo. The benefits, the bennies,
they're crazy.
yo.
Yeah, the bennies are crazy. Like you really out here, like you can do that, and while everybody else is laughing at you because you know you might have been doing the garbage work or whatever like this, or you know they're looking at MTA, they're not realizing that what comes with a job like that. You know they're not realizing
now you got a $1 million home in Laurelton, Queens that you could sell.
Exactly.
You know,
shout out to the Haitians. You know what I'm saying, out in Laurelton. You know. You know, but that really is that's one of the things I wish that I had the foresight or the presence of mind to think about that. And the second thing is like, wow, I wish I would have really had the presence of mind to think about plastic surgery, but not in the sense of me wanting to give BBLs, but imagine the industry that's coming out of this with these types of plastic surgeries where you're having to go back and fix this type of work. So reconstructed plastic surgery from bad procedures, the kind of money that can be made in entering that realm. I mean, you know, any little baby child of mine, I'm gonna be like, mama wants you to grow up so you can reverse BBLs.
Yeah, no, for real. It's either you going in STEM or you doing fat removal procedures. Like
yes, silicone removals, fat removals, yeah.
Oh,
absolutely.
And
it is going back to Glorilla. The reason why this conversation is so troubling is because if you watch any of this the information regarding that particular procedure, they say it is a very, very dangerous surgery. It is one of those ones, you know, they tend to say that like getting breast implants is not as invasive. But with BBLs, there's so many ways that particular procedure can go so wrong. It is never really something that will be recommended by someone that is just concerned about, you know, what your health, what the outlook could be in a worst case scenario. You know, it's kind of like it's just not necessarily worth it for most people. But
I feel like there's also this dividing line between medical doctors and cosmetic doctors. Like I know that they are trained in medicine, but it's like when your focus becomes like just the cosmetic surgery part, I just feel like you're not the same level of doctor as like an orthopedic surgeon. You know what I mean?
Right. Like it's well, right. So like if let's just say like where I would want to go with it, like if I were for one even smart enough to be a medical doctor, whether that's cosmetic or otherwise, you know, I mean, we gotta, you know, I'm gonna give credit where it's due. Like this takes a tremendous amount of work and research and dedication to be someone that can actually execute on that higher level. And
you know, I mean, you know, Dr. Oz, like, you know, there's
well,
other
there's other things like that. I have more respect for the people that go into like, let's say like cleft palate surgeries, things where it's like people they have something going on with like the buildup in their teeth or something like crowding where it's like it was making it difficult for them to eat. Just things that can help a person in their life or that can improve the quality of their life. That's more so what I would be into. I mean, who cares if this person has a fat ass or a big titties or whatever? That's just, you know, that's just, But I mean, of course, people are going to do what they want to do. But again, going back to Glorilla, I think that it is fascinating that we're living in a world where someone is being told that they're inadequate because of the body that they were born in.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, I'm of the belief that like, and follow me here, that Glorilla is like an NBA player who is drafted and gets their team to the playoffs and the championship, like, and doesn't go and join a super team to get those same results. So I feel like Nicki Minaj, Cardi B, they join super teams. Like when you get the BBL, that's the equivalent of joining a super team. You got on the Warriors, you got on the Miami Heat, you know what I'm saying? You got on the Lakers. That is like the super team move when you're a good player and you're like, I just need that little extra edge. I just need that like one Hall of Fame all-star teammate, and then I'm gonna go to the finals. And like, sure, you still have to work hard. You still have to like really put in an extra level of preparation to get to the finals, but it's not quite the same as when you're Giannis and you.
I was gonna use Giannis,
You know what I'm saying? You're Giannis, and like you got drafted by that team. You had to develop. Like Glorilla right now, she's a Giannis. She's a Dame Lillard. Like she's a homegrown product. She's like that girl next door. The BBL puts you in that like that other realm of like,
it's a little bit,
it's a little bit too much. You know what I mean?
It's a super team. It's a super team cheat.
Yeah, team cheat code.
But then there's somebody like Meg Thee Stallion, who's just a genetic freaking anomaly and freak of nature, who has like just a homegrown Texas girl. Her body is just ridiculous, and I don't for a second believe that Meg is in the gym like that. I really do believe that she's just one of those people that
just genetic.
I mean. She may, as time goes on, she may decide to kind of go more that way because as you get older, you kind of have to put a little more work in.
Yeah, you can't be driving the boat every day.
Yeah, you can't every day. There's just a point where you're gonna fucking drown. You cannot do that shit. But I guess that's interesting too because they are the people like the Nickis and the Cardis who bought the body that they felt they deserved. There's the person Glorilla who, to me, that's so healthy to think that someone can represent, like, dude, this is me. It may not be, I don't have this and that, but I'm okay with how I look. That's the messaging I think that's more positive. Then it's interesting because you have someone like Megan who really, I mean, she didn't ask to be built that way, like to just have this like literal, like, this goddess structure. But that's just how she was born, and that's just who she is. So it's interesting because unfortunately somebody like Megan would probably inform why people would get these procedures before a Cardi or a Nicki would. And I don't even think that somebody like Megan would even think about having anything done to her body. She doesn't need to. She would never need to. But it's just interesting how that works.
I'm rooting for Glorilla. I'm rooting for her to keep her natural body, whatever she wants to do, right? But we've seen it go the other way with some of our female rap heroes, and I wouldn't wish that on her, And I think there are like health implications of when you do a lot of the other things and you don't get them removed. So I don't think I would really wish that for her. And like rap life isn't all it's cracked up to be, to like sacrifice your whole body for it. You know what I mean?
No.
Like let's look at Eve. You know what I mean? Like she got in, got out. Like you don't have to do all that to like to live a great life off of being in rap.
I think Eve is the perfect example of someone who did not change her body. She was not necessarily like the most voluptuous person in rap or anything like that, but she still had a sexiness that she exuded, and she still looked really good. Eve does not have extremely large breasts. She never had the biggest butt in the room or anything like that, but she still looked good. So I think it's healthy to see people that are beautiful and don't have to necessarily alter themselves. But I'm also saying that I'm not making judgments or sweeping judgments about why someone would decide to. That's not really. I'm not even concerned about that. But I don't want anybody to have to feel like they have to measure up to anybody else's ideal. You should obviously do what makes you happy.
Right. I mean, if I can be body positive about my disconnected beard, I feel like she can be body positive about having like a girl next door, Black girl body. And then like in other news pertaining to rap life isn't all it's cracked up to be. So you sent me this story. I think it was from Hollywood Unlocked, another one of my favorite sources, one of my favorite trusted authorities.
One of your favorite sources say.
Yeah, my favorite sources say. And apparently a rapper told his ops to come through, to pull up, and dropped his location if they had beef. And what happened when he did that?
So yeah, and I want to make sure that I get this correctly. It's a guy. He's from Tampa. He's a rapper. Everybody now that's dying is supposedly a rapper. So before we even talk about this, it's like, what qualifies being a rapper? Everybody is a rapper. You know, is it because somebody just wrote a Hot 16 once and it was a one-off and now they're a rapper? Everybody is considered a rapper. I mean, is he a rapper? Was he working at Subway and happened to write rhymes? Like, it's just like, we gotta just stop doing this. But anyways, Tampa rapper, his name is Rollie Bandz. He was killed at his apartment complex because, and I quote, he said, "If a nigga wants smoke, pull up. I'm at my crib in 5 minutes." So and that was a shout to his ops.
Wow.
And so they pulled up and they killed him.
Wow, bro. So wait, he can't write a verse about that now, huh? Listen, and you know, he probably had the fire verse plan too. Like, I drop a location.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like he was definitely thinking about how he'd drop a pin and like then drop them. I think the problem with rap culture, like here's the thing. Like, I remember when Eric Adams was like talking about how like we gotta like cleanse Brooklyn of the drill rap and rap culture. And
he was definitely on his C. Dolores Tucker. Like, absolutely. Like back in the day when she was like steamrolling the CD.
Tipper Gore.
You know, when I talk about like history, will be kind to certain people, individuals, you know, as time passes. Yes. I think that history is far kinder now to C. Dolores Tucker than people were in the moment, because what this woman really was saying is like, listen to the messages in this music, listen to what we're allowing these people to talk about.
And Tupac was like, Tupac used her as like an example, like, nah, like, you don't understand thug life. And
I mean, Tupac was like, fuck C. Dolores Tucker. I mean, Tupac was typical of a 20-something, right? Yeah. All that angst and anger, like, how dare this woman tell us what we can rap about? I mean, he had his points and she had her points too. But when you think about that, and especially as we all get older, was she really coming from a terrible place? You know,
I mean, like, look, and this is not to say that he deserved it, but Tupac got killed. You know what I'm saying? Like, he was like, yo, the music ain't about getting killed, and got killed. So like, I think the thing about like the wisdom of our elders is like, we should listen to it. Like, and our elders aren't always coming from the best place, right? Like, our elders aren't always informed about how times are changing or like the ways that youth need to express themselves. But like, when she was seeing the power, I think that's the thing that we neglected about those voices, is like seeing the power of that art form. And I think hip hop has always had this really unique form of power to like manifest things for people, to like make things real that they didn't really imagine could be real. Like, you didn't imagine as a duo from Georgia, as the MIGOS, that you were gonna go from like trapping out the bando to like worldwide superstars. Like, but hip hop is that tool, right? But because something's so powerful, and like any tool, when misused, it can be really dangerous. And so I think that is this guy and his Darwin Award winning pin drop is the example of like how you wasn't really a rapper, but you used the power of rap, and you ended up abusing the power of rap to your own demise.
You know, it's very interesting because this is something I've wanted to talk about, that you bring up the MIGOS very specifically, and this idea of trapping out the bando. You know, the MIGOS are from Gwinnett County. I lived in Atlanta for quite some time, so I'm familiar with what that is. Gwinnett is solidly suburban. If you're trapping out the bando and you from Gwinnett, you just want to. You know, you just feel like, you know, being out there in the trenches, getting it out the mud. You just want to, you know, you're just cosplaying. You're on some new shit. But that doesn't mean that that's not authentic. And I say this because you got a lot of people that are live out the cul-de-sac that, to me, I find that a lot of suburban people tend to be far more dangerous because they have something to prove, you know? So they might actually be more malignant. They might be more psychopathic even. These people really their own agenda is to prove to you guys that, like, listen, I know I grew up in this particular circumstance, but that doesn't mean that, you know, I ain't like that. And a lot of the times, like when I hear about a lot of crazy stuff like that, or even when you see people get busted for drug deals and all kinds of things, and like this person was a kingpin, you look at how they grew up, and it's like, it didn't even have to be like that.
Yeah,
But
it's Tampa, man. Like, don't do it to yourself. Like, you could have been, you could have had a really good life on the beaches. I think, I do agree that like we push that lifestyle and we push the idea of like authenticity and cred via like danger, or like the mystique of danger, when like a lot of our most successful figures like actually went out of their way to avoid that, and like, and maybe were even brought up in it like a hammer, but they then weren't able to kind of keep up that life because they didn't want to be a part of it. And it's weird because Steven Jackson was actually like chastising NBA rappers who are talking about that same thing, where they grew up in the suburbs, but now they're talking about busting guns. And he's like, yo, why are you doing that? Like, you're not from that. And I have the answer. It's because Steven Jackson was doing that.
I don't even understand why he would do that, and because he knows better. And I know with Steven Jackson, you know, Stack is the kind of person that did come from something where he can actually like speak to that as far as how silly it looks to him, because it's like, why are you trying to act like, you know, like, because I mean, really, if we're talking about it, the type of people he's talking about is somebody like John Morant, right? John Morant's got like fucking like matching family pictures where everybody's dressed alike, where they didn't go to like the JCPenney portrait studio, like they had the photographer come on the lawn and capture everything. There's nothing wrong with that, you know what I'm saying? But now you on social media, you know, acting like you got ops, and it's just like, dude, like that's just unnecessary. That's why I have such tremendous respect for someone like a Seth Curry, because he's not pretending, you know what I mean? Like he's legacy NBA. You know, he grew up with his parents. He's not trying to act like it was, you know, something that it wasn't.
And there's
nothing wrong with it. Whereas I also respect someone like a LeBron, who, again, they're both actually from Akron, I suppose. But I respect LeBron because LeBron could be that guy and tell that kind of story that sort of just makes him, he just didn't, you know, he focused on the game and just not trying to create some sort of like, you know, a narrative that made him like harder than the next man, you know? So I just think like when people focus on those kind of, it's like, dude, like what does that even, what are you achieving? And like you said, a lot of the people that we know that do a lot of community advocacy work are people that are really like so on the ground and like, you know, not being performative in their activism or their concerns about the world and the day-to-day. They may have had very, very troubled or tumultuous backgrounds, but they don't center those stories because they don't want you to be what they may have come from. And, you know, of course, like we were saying earlier, like, you know, we know people that have been to prison, and those kinds of people aren't over here like, you know, pimping at the pulpit. Some of them are reaching back into the community and being like, don't be like me. I've been there before. I know what this was, you know, and I don't want you to become, you know, a product of the same cycle that I was a product of.
I mean, and that actually takes real bravery, like to say, hey, this is the thing I was from, and it was hard to get out of that. It wasn't ideal, and I don't knock it, I don't like drag it, but I don't celebrate it either. That's the thing that takes a lot of courage, whereas like the pretending, the cloud chasing, that's much more common. So I do understand like where Steven Jackson was coming from, like don't pretend, but also like Steven Jackson be pretending, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I just think like to me, like the whole O Block flex was just so unusual. I just don't, I still don't understand.
But he used to rap too. Like when he was in the NBA, he rapped Blood, and he rapped. So like people could have said the same exact thing about him. And it's like, yo, where do you think they learned it from, Steve? Like what you actually like, are you punishing yourself too? Because like you were definitely a part of that way. He like, this is like Malice at the Palace, Steven Jackson. Like you weren't necessarily like the crown example of like not trying to live that life.
Which is why I would appreciate if the messaging wasn't more so like, hey y'all, I'm an O Block iced out, you know, you were already like, if it wasn't more that, and he just did something where he was able to communicate with those kids to sort of just not promote that. I don't know. I just didn't like how it looked. I still don't understand the point of that. And has he spoken on it?
I don't know, but we should get Steven Jackson on the show. Like we should get our all the smoke podcast to podcast interview and like find out
I love him, and I love Matt Barnes too. I like, actually, I think they're very complimentary because they have different interview styles, and Matt tends to sort of be the straight man in that sense, like he's a little more serious. But I think they do a great job, and I of course I always love when people can speak to things from a player perspective, and they're not just talking heads, just being a-holes and jerks, and they can say like I was there. That's why I'm really interested in I know I'm going to enjoy Draymond's second act as a commentator.
Oh man, it's gonna be pricey.
It's gonna be yeah. I love his take on things. So yeah, for sure.
I feel like that is a great episode of Unhinged. I'm like really proud of all that we covered. And now you see my lighting is like crazy.
Yeah, you look like you're like, when we were talking about like all that religious stuff earlier, I'm like wondering like
this is the halo
did
right
Jesus,
now.
Did he cast his light upon you? Are you the Messiah? Are you up next?
I'm dressed like it. I'm dressed like it. But yo, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm glad we got to jump in on a conversation. I love being ambitious and trying to cover all topics at all times. I'm drewbreez. Happy to be here. Happy to be unhinged. Thank you, Koku. It's been a great one.
Thank you, Drew. I'm Koku Puff. I'm happy to be unhinged as well. And I'm so glad you guys joined us. We'll discuss other things and you'll let us know what's on your mind.
All right, drop a comment, like, subscribe. Peace.
And ring that bell.
Thanks for checking out the Unhinged podcast with Koku Puff and drewbreez. If you like what you see, make sure you like, subscribe, and ring that bell.